Hello everyone. We're in the Falcom universe again today. Today I'll be talking about a game that's very dear to my heart, and that is Tokyo Xanadu. I've been playing it since 2017, so yes, there's quite a story behind it. Today I'll make a start with the very new, just fresh out of the blocks, Switch version. I'll be doing another video a bit later with a more in-depth look at the history behind the game, the versions I've played. This is now the third version I'm on. So the occasion is the release of this new version for the Switch by publisher Aksys, and Aksys Europe very kindly provided what's called the Online Special Edition, which is the game together with an expanded complete soundtrack. I believe it has 4 CDs. I think I've had a selection of tracks before for Tokyo Xanadu, and I am very fond of the soundtrack, but this would definitely be the most complete soundtrack for the game. So many thanks to Aksys Europe and also Reef Entertainment who organised this. As always, a bit more complicated to get it all the way to New Zealand. So I'll make a start on getting the cellophane off. As I said, not in great depth today. I just want to basically introduce you to the Switch version. I had to have an assistant today. Is Morimaru. Morimaru is the fabulously popular mascot for Morimaru City. Where's Morimaru City? What am I talking about? The story of Tokyo Xanadu is set in a fictional city in Tokyo. It's called Morimaru. And they decided this little fellow, who is in reality, the real mascot is, life-size, is going to be their ambassador. I think you'll agree he is really cute. How I got him is another story which I will cover in the later video. If you are familiar with the 2 flagship game series of Falcom, Kiseki, the Trails series, turn-based, and on the other hand, the long-running, fabulous East series, action RPG, then you might be wondering, what is this game Tokyo Xanadu? Some of you will know it and will have played it in the past, no doubt, but I think many people are a bit unclear where it comes from and why it even exists. The name Xanadu goes back a long, long way, but I won't go into the history here, back to the 1980s when Falcom started with a Xanadu game. So Tokyo Xanadu is kind of a modern spin-off out of that Xanadu heritage, to put it quite simply. So in 2015, Tokyo Xanadu was released in Japan as a handheld game for the PlayStation Vita. At the time, Falcom wanted to try out something a bit different from either of their 2 flagships and see if they could set a story and a game in a modern milieu, in a setting that was basically Tokyo, and dealt with high school students at a modern high school and all the paraphernalia of modern life, including smartphones, of course.
私も恋愛相談随分と盛り上がってるわね。あ、ダウンロード？何のこと？まだ 神様アプリだよ。悩みがあっという間に解決するって評判なんだから。へえ、そんなアプリ盛り上がってる。
休み明けからえらくやかましいっつうか、神様がどうとか一体何の話だ。
なんだお前、知らねえのか。ふふん、だったらこの俺が教えてしんぜよ。
確かに悪く。
お、もしかしてつい今まで散々貸してやって。
Would you agree that the dialogue flows really well and feels natural?
そうだろそうだろ。ま、今日は当日券もねえだろ。次のミニライブ。
りょうたくんのサイフォンじゃない？
ああ、今日の運勢を自動で知らせてくれる設定。なんだこりゃ。
今日のあなたは最悪でしょう。
さてと、俺もそろそろ行くか。
こうちゃん、今日もアルバイト？
あ
あ。また夜のバイト。あのね、こうちゃん、そんなことじゃまたおじいさんに。
If you don't know anything about Tokyo Xanadu, I will just show you a short clip I've put together, captured from the Switch version to give you a first impression, just so you've got an idea of the setting and background to the story. No major spoilers, I promise. So let's have a look at that. Let's start up the game and have a look at the brief prologue. The first 10 minutes will give you a good idea what it's all about. 10 years ago, a colossal earthquake devastated Tokyo. The city has since been rebuilt. However, behind the veil of this newly rebuilt metropolis lies another world, one with a sinister secret. The earthquake that originally destroyed Tokyo was actually caused by the emergence of a mysterious and lethal shadow world known as the Eclipse. The story begins in the entertainment district of Morimaru City, and here at the coffee bar we see our main protagonist. Ko Tokisaka. He's been working at the coffee bar, one of his many part-time jobs, and this quite mundane part of his personal life is also important for the story itself. Here we see his fellow student, Hiragi. She excels at everything she does, and she is an incredibly important character for the unfolding events. What happens is pretty obvious. Two young males try to impose themselves on Hiragi in a very unpleasant manner. And Ko, of course, follows, trying to intervene and assist.
Hmm, 見れば見るほど綺麗。笑顔の一つくらい。あいつらチーマーか？仕方ない。おい、あんたら。なんだ？赤いひび？現
れたわね。
なんだよ、何が起き。ヒイラギー。 なんだ何が起き
Of course, we realize what has happened and that he's been sucked into the eclipse. But for Ko, this is not yet obvious at all.
不気味っつうかまさか柊おいどこだ柊あのチーマーどももいねえさっきのに巻き込まれたのかわけがわかんねえここでうだうだや柊と出口を探さねえと
And we can save. A good idea. We'll do that straight away before we plunge deeper into this labyrinth. Only 5 minutes into the game and we've already been portaled into an eclipse dungeon. Okay, let's go.
なんだかうすら寒いなやたらと静かだし黙ってると不安になってくるぜ
You can see here on the detailed dungeon map exactly how far Ko has come into the labyrinth. The map, by the way, as in all Falcom games, is very good. I'd be lost without it. We have to face the darkness now.
あれは柊に無事みたいだなたなんだ逃げろ柊
And here we see the importance of the cell phones. Asuka is calling up her soul device, her eclipse weapon. By the way, I hope you are enjoying the visuals in the game. I always do. Let's watch Asuka in action.
Yeah! Yeah?
Very impressive, wouldn't you say? We're back in the real world. The eclipse is gone, and Ko is feeling the after effects.
無事みたいね。あなたが見える人とは思わなかったけど、あの状況で飛び込んでくるなんて。
なあ柊これってじゃなきゃ
ええ、ただの一夜の悪い夢。
柊
でも安心して、悪夢もいつかは覚めるもの。おやすみなさい、時坂くん。
That was the introduction to Tokyo Xanadu. Maybe, like me, you simply like this kind of story, even if it riffs on games or anime you may have experienced before. I sometimes feel like Tokyo Xanadu is a bit sort of the neglected stepchild in the Falcom library of games. The problem is that it's almost a bit unfair to compare it with either of the two big flagships. I don't think it was ever meant to be a highly complex game. It was originally developed for handheld gameplay, for people to be able to enjoy it on the go and just have some fun with a modern action RPG. And that's how I first played it on the Vita and really, really enjoyed it all those years ago. So here we have the CD set, Complete Works, Tokyo Xanadu original soundtrack, plus Tokyo Xanadu EX plus original soundtrack, because there are two versions of the game. Something I won't go into too much today. The Vita version was the first original version. Very soon after, the PlayStation 4 version was released in an expanded format with a lot more content and changes and improvements. So we'll look at that in the next video. So as usual, I'll be taking some tracks off these discs and I will use them for a bit of background music here. So 4 CDs in total, and I do like the cover image. Very striking. So I've mentioned how Tokyo Xanadu is often considered to be a bit the lesser game in the Falcom universe. If you look at the game today with the eyes of someone who's only ever seen Trails Through Daybreak, the most recent Falcom game, then you'd obviously notice the difference. A modern game engine, much more advanced graphics for Daybreak, Tokyo Xanadu, originally devised for the Vita, then upgraded to HD for the PS4. But the thing is, with any of these games, you always see that they were originally a lower resolution. You cannot disguise that, and they haven't tried to. For me, that's always been totally fine. I like the characters, I like how they are portrayed, the character design, the whole world and the backgrounds are, I think, really well done if you consider that's practically 10 years ago for a handheld game. On the Vita, it nearly blew me away. It was an amazing experience because you can walk around many parts of that city, and to this day I like just ambling around, visiting the shops, getting my stuff organised and purchased. It's just one of the pleasures of this type of game. If you're someone who wants non-stop action, these types of games are probably not for you, because they're roughly divided half and half into dungeon combat gameplay. Let's have a look at the introductory dungeon where Ko and Asuka are trying to rescue Shiori, who got sucked into the eclipse. You saw there a small tutorial about elemental alignment and how to exploit weaknesses. If you stick to that basic rule, you basically can't go wrong. Asuka there hit a switch you will find many in the many dungeons. Here, Ko is using his ranged skill, and I cannot emphasize enough how incredibly useful that is. Asuka, likewise, has a powerful ranged skill from a safe distance. The enemies in this game really have a very wide variety of attack patterns, and some can be downright nasty and with one hit decimate you, especially if you choose to play at a higher difficulty level, and there are 5. This was a protracted fight, chipping away. Without any special skills, it was hard to really dig into that HP, but the upcoming boss fight will change all that. We exit the dungeon itself, and are presented with our stage result. A whole slew of stats go into that. What I want to point out here is that this is really typical for a portable game, where the emphasis is on clearing a great number of dungeons and aiming for the highest achievement. You can replay any dungeon, plus there are extra and bonus dungeons. I often think it's a case of wrong expectation if people judge the game for what it is not. It's the same pattern for every chapter. Rescue a person or solve a problem in the dungeon, face the final boss. End of chapter, on to the next one.
なんだあの
エルダーグリード、あれを倒すことができれば。
だったら行くぞ柊！
I'm getting a hammering here. I also accidentally pressed the left stick, which means I went into turbo mode. Elder Greeds often have guard resistance to ranged attacks. I have to use patience here to survive. Fortunately, the game makes it really easy to do so. The Co asks now, why won't it go down? And Asuka finally decides to pull out her big trick. We can now use the X strike, and you will notice that the yellow S symbol is now lit up.
Eh, 完全に消滅。
これは
イクリプスの収束。任務完了ね。
End of first chapter. Shiri was rescued, and story time, gameplay in the city, aiming mainly for developing your social bonds, your relationships with other people, not just in high school or with your little team of friends, but also with the wider community. And the school obviously provides lots of socializing opportunities, and the map again is really helpful for picking out who you'd like to talk to. And conversations aren't always necessarily bland and unrealistically positive. There is a very large cast in Tokyo Xanadu, and if you're a bit of a completionist, this is a good game for making sure you really track down everybody and manage to unlock all the scenes that further your relationship with these people. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I would say to be able to enjoy the game fully, you need to pursue the main story and the important side quests, and they are clearly marked, and that's not too many per chapter, because they will give you crucial upgrade skills, etc. But apart from that, you don't have to do the other stuff. There are quite a lot of mini-games, quite extensive, from skateboarding to playing computer games at an arcade. You could be spending a lot of time on those. I'm personally not hugely into mini-games. There are some special bonuses you can get if you become really good at one or several of these mini games, but it's not anything game-breaking. You can please yourself and play the game as you like to do. So I'll now show you just a few clips demonstrating the social bonding side of the game, and then I'll talk about a really interesting aspect. Here we go. The crucial affinity events you should always do. You start out with only 2 per chapter, so they're quickly done. Let's see how Ko's affinity event with Sora goes. Sora is a karate club prodigy, and Ko has been missing an awful lot of practice at the dojo over the last few years. Remember, he's the king of part-time jobs. And this is why affinity is so important. Your bond is strengthened and your soul level goes up. This is one of the few ways you can boost that. Okay, so we have a high school with a group of students who go out into dungeons to, fight evil forces. And outside of that, there is a lot of relationship building involved. No doubt you will hear or read comments saying, "Oh, it's just another Persona imitation." Let me just say that's just so unfair. I don't think people have really understood what role the Persona games have played in Japanese game development. Bad developers copy and imitate. Good developers take inspiration from the best games. Now, I think you'll agree with me that the Persona craze didn't really become a full-powered juggernaut until Persona 5, which released in Japan in 2016. Tokyo Xanadu came out the year before. They didn't know Persona 5, but they would have been aware, obviously, of Persona 4, and in particular Persona 4 Golden, which was the one that made the game much more broadly popular. And that came out in 2012. So during the game development, I'm sure they would have noticed what that Persona game was doing. I imagine, like so many other games since then, took inspiration, looked at the mechanics, the aspects, and then tried to do something with their own game that used these mechanics as well. And they've done it in their own way. That's the important thing. And I think it works really well. I think I've mentioned before that for me, Persona 4 has a special impact because of that tight-knit group you have who form a very strong friendship. I don't think anyone who's played it hasn't been affected by that. It's just a special feeling you get as you get to know them as they progress through the story. There are very few games for me that have equaled that. And I have to say, one reason why I've been playing this game since 2017 is because it gives me a similar kind of feeling, an emotional connection to what Persona 4 did. I just love following along the progress of how this group forms and slowly manage to get some cohesion, build strong bonds. All the characters are well written, they're each distinct personalities, and I think the whole group just works well. People have often asked me, what is your favourite character in this or that game? And I have always said what is more important to me than maybe just an individual liking or attachment to a particular character, which might change over time, honestly. More important to me is the group dynamics. How has that been handled? And it takes a lot of experience and dedication, I would say, to get it right. I think they got it pretty much right in Tokyo Xanadu. While it may not be the kind of action RPG that will blow you away, the most brilliant game of its generation, no, probably not. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be something else. It's the game I turn to when I want to play a JRPG that is not overly complicated in its combat system, that has a good flow between dungeons and the social and school life, where I can just enjoy going shopping or hanging out with these characters. Each time I play it, I discover new little connections. There's a lot hidden in that game. If you want to access that, you could have a field day. We often talk about comfort games, the ones we turn to when we don't want a game that is so challenging, it leaves you emotionally exhausted. We sometimes need different types of games. I often turn to the atelier games for that, but I would say Tokyo Xanadu is another one that I would put in that category. So I've already mentioned that the combat is less complex and complicated than it is in other Falcom games. While it is an action RPG, so could be compared to Ys, the Ys combat is, for me at least, quite different. They pared it down in Tokyo Xanadu because you only ever basically have 3 people operating inside a dungeon. The important thing is you constantly need to swap them around. Depending on the elemental weakness is what really counts. Battle history gives you a great overview of enemy elemental strengths and weaknesses. And of course those drop items you might need as well. And constantly swapping your acting character is super important. That's where I feel the fun and the fluidity of the game lies. You do get quite a few special attacks. They're usually called EX skills or drives, and it can be fun building up the meter and then unleashing those. So a lot of you will be asking, how does it play on the Switch? Is it worth getting this edition rather than one of the other ones? The Vita version is the smallest, it is the shortest. I would say it's about 40 hours if you want to do a main story and important side quests. But with the EX Plus edition, that was boosted up to a good 60 hours and you can easily spend more time. So the EX Plus version is the one that comes with all the extra DLC, the extra content, all the bonus stuff and improvements they added in. Plus one very important feature, a fresh localization. Now, at first I was a bit sceptical when I heard that because, as I said, I've been playing Tokyo Xanadu for a number of years. The localization in the PlayStation games never struck me as bad or detracting from the game. There were passages which I thought felt a bit off sometimes, like suddenly a character might say something and you think, what are they trying to say there? Or funny, that doesn't feel like the sort of thing this character would say. There were the odd patches like that were a bit noticeable, and sometimes a few expressions were perhaps not quite what you'd expect in our day. It never meant I didn't enjoy the game, it just was the occasional blip, I would say. Well, I have been able to play a good 10 hours so far. What I notice about the text is that I don't notice it so much anymore. I know that sounds a bit weird. What I mean by that is it just flows, and it's just so natural that I'm just listening to the people talking and taking it all in. It just feels more polished all round. I think the writing for Tokyo Xanadu in general is very good. So all it needed was a translation, a localization that really brings that out and brings the characters maybe even closer to you, empathizing with them and wanting to walk along on their journey. This is probably finally the definitive edition that we're going to have for Tokyo Xanadu. I say that not just because of the localization, but also because of how it plays on the Switch. I did wonder, because, I've mentioned it in other videos before, there's always a concern nowadays with any game, how will it run on the Switch, on this aging hardware? You all know what I mean. I wasn't too worried because this was originally a Vita game, so surely Falcom would have people porting this to the Switch who know what they're doing and can do a good job. And that's exactly what happened, because it runs beautifully, and I was really surprised that the visuals look as good as they do. In many games ported to the Switch, I see a sort of unpleasant flicker effect when the camera pans across the backgrounds, and that is not the case here. I honestly think it looks fabulous. And no, I'm not saying that because they sent me a copy. You know me, I'm the nitpickiest person. There isn't an awful lot I can nitpick here. Well, maybe I found one little blip, possibly. Here's the English teacher, Mr. Goro, who is incredibly popular, especially with the female students. And he always asks Hiragi, presumably because she lived in the United States for many years, so her English would be very good. And while she's reading, and we read the English translation, there's one short moment when we have the text in Japanese characters, and I'm honestly not sure whether that's deliberate or just one of those accidental oversights. Mr. Goro praises her pronunciation, so I assume it's meant to showcase Hiragi's translation skills as well. What do you think? Anyway, there's a really funny little conversation going on amongst the students here. Once again, I think a great example of very natural chit-chat going on. So if you are looking for your next JRPG, action RPG gameplay on the Switch, and people tell you that this game is kind of mid, all I can say is I've been enjoying it since 2017, and I'm enjoying this version immensely, and I feel very confident recommending it for an enjoyable time with Ko and Asuka and Mitsuki and Yuki and Sora and Shiori and Ryota and all the others. They're a great bunch to hang out with, I hope you found this informative, maybe helpful for deciding about the game. As always, many thanks for your time. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.